The signal buoy outside Admiral Marin Solin's viewport turned once every 40 seconds, its amber pulse reflecting off the glass like a slow heartbeat in the silence of Third Fleet's anchorage above Caldera Prime. She sat in the darkened flag suite of the dreadnought Finality, her boots propped on the edge of the tactical console, watching the buoy's rotation through the reinforced transparency while the fleet behind her slept. 209 warships at anchor, weapons cold, drives on standby, crews cycling through the middle watch. The most dangerous concentration of Terran naval power in the outer reach, resting with the particular stillness of something that had nowhere to be. In 3 hours that would change. Solin knew it the way she knew weather, not from instruments, but from the quality of the air. She had been sitting in this chair for 90 minutes, unable to sleep, unable to name the pressure building behind her sternum that had nothing to do with caffeine and everything to do with the encrypted message sitting on her personal console, read 3 times, verified twice, and now burning in her memory like a brand pressed into wet clay. The tactical display on the bulkhead showed green across all sectors. The comm channels carried nothing but routine watch reports and the low murmur of the Caldera Orbital Traffic Authority clearing freighters through the commercial lanes. Everything was nominal. Everything was quiet. And that quiet had a weight to it that made the skin along her forearms prickle, the way air pressure drops before a storm front that instruments have not yet registered. She was 53 years old, 29 years in Terran Fleet Command, 11 of them in flag rank, the last 4 commanding Third Fleet from this chair. She had fought at Vendris Gate, at the Ketharan blockade, at the siege of Merak Station, engagements that had aged her in ways the service record did not show, that had drawn the deep lines around her mouth and put the particular cold clarity into her gray eyes that her officers recognized as command-grade composure, and her enemies had learned, at cost, to respect. She was not a woman who startled at shadows. But the shadows tonight had teeth she could not see, and the encrypted message on her console had given those teeth a name. 19 years ago, she had sat in a different chair, the executive officer's seat aboard the cruiser Harrow, in orbit above a world called Tessara. Tessara was a Terran colony, 42,000 civilians, agricultural workers, mineral surveyors, hydrologists, soil chemists, construction engineers, teachers who had signed 3-year contracts, medical staff who had volunteered for frontier assignments, and their families living in a string of 7 settlements along the planet's temperate equatorial belt. The colony was 4 years old, still growing, still building, still sending optimistic quarterly reports to the Colonial Development Bureau about soil yields, water table access, the particular challenges of establishing root crops in soil with a slightly elevated magnesium content, and the progress of a school complex in Settlement 3 that was 6 weeks from completion. It was the kind of place that existed because humanity had decided, with characteristic stubbornness, that even marginal worlds at the edge of mapped space were worth the effort of living on. The Draenith Ascendancy had considered those quarterly reports, not the content, the implication. Tessara sat in a corridor of space that the Ascendancy considered strategically valuable for the expansion of commercial transit routes, and the colony's presence complicated their plans for a forward logistics depot that would service trade convoys moving through the region. The Ascendancy was not a war power. They were a trade federation, 11 species bound by commercial treaties and mutual profit calculations, led by the Draenith themselves, a species whose cultural identity was so deeply entwined with commerce that their word for diplomat and their word for broker were the same phoneme, distinguished only by vocal register. They did not fight wars. They negotiated outcomes. And when negotiation proved inconvenient, they found quieter methods. Tessara was, in their calculations, simple. The colony was small, undefended, located in a system with no permanent Terran naval presence, and administered by a civilian governor whose authority extended to agricultural policy and infrastructure allocation, not military coordination. The Ascendancy's governing board, the Conclave of Margins, calculated that a direct action against such a minor target would fall below Earth's threshold for military response. A remote colony of 42,000 people, they reasoned, was not worth a fleet deployment. The math was clean. The cost-benefit was favorable. The risk was manageable. The conclave voted. The margin was narrow, 7-4, with the 4 dissenting members recording formal objections that would later be cited in the Ascendancy's internal review as evidence that the decision had been properly debated, as though documented objection somehow diminished the crime of a decision made regardless. The 7 who voted yes authorized Operation Quiet Margin, the orbital bombardment of all 7 colony settlements using kinetic impactors launched from Ascendancy logistics vessels. Not warships, logistics vessels. Converted freighters with mass driver arrays bolted to their cargo bays, the installation work logged under commercial maintenance protocols. The weapons of a civilization that did not consider itself a military power, and therefore did not feel the need to call what it was about to do an act of war. They had filed the operation under their commercial disruption protocols. Category: territorial adjustment, subcategory: infrastructure clearance. The paperwork classified 42,000 human beings as infrastructure. 19 years ago, Lieutenant Commander Marin Solin had watched the aftermath from the Harrow's Bridge. The cruiser had arrived 11 hours too late, dispatched on a routine patrol that had been, by terrible coincidence, 3 systems away when Tessara's emergency beacon activated. 11 hours. By the time the Harrow dropped out of transit, the Ascendancy's logistics ships were gone, and Tessara's equatorial belt was a chain of impact craters glowing dull orange against the planet's darkened surface. 7 wounds in the Earth where 7 settlements had been. Each crater centered on the exact coordinates of a settlement's administrative complex, with the precision of a commercial enterprise that kept its records impeccable. She remembered the silence on the bridge. Not the absence of sound, the absence of words. The sensor displays cycling through their data, the ventilation system humming its flat monotone, the soft chime of incoming telemetry, all of it present, none of it registering against the thing on the main screen. She remembered Captain Dreher gripping the arms of his command chair with both hands, his knuckles white, his face the color of ash, staring at the thermal overlay as if the data might rearrange itself into something less absolute if he waited long enough. She remembered the sensor officer, Lieutenant Amal Akafer, 24 years old, 2 months out of the academy, on her first deep space assignment, reading the life sign data in a tone that started professional and ended in something that was not quite a whisper and not quite a sob. Confirmed 0 biological signatures in Settlement 1 through Settlement 7. Thermal readings consistent with kinetic impact sterilization across all 7 sites. No survivors detected in the primary search perimeter, expanding to secondary. No change, no signatures, 0 across all bands, all frequencies. Total confirmed casualties, 42,314. 42,314. Wiped from existence by a trade federation that had done the math and decided they were an acceptable subtraction. Solin had stood at the sensor station and stared at the thermal overlay until Dreher ordered her to the shuttle bay to lead the ground survey team. She had walked through the craters in an environmental suit, her boots crunching on ground that had been fused into a dark glass by the kinetic impacts, vitrified earth, alien to the touch, the remnants of structures reduced to molecular scatter embedded in the glass like insects in amber. A door frame here, half melted into a shape that might have been modern art if you did not know what it was. A section of water pipe there, compressed into a flat ribbon of alloy by the force of an impactor traveling at 11 kilometers per second. The outline of a foundation in Settlement 4, visible only as a slightly different shade in the fused earth, the ghost of a building that had contained, according to colony records, a medical clinic, a general store, and a community meeting hall where the settlers held weekly councils to discuss crop rotation schedules and water rights. She had found a child's shoe in the debris field outside Settlement 3, the settlement whose school complex had been 6 weeks from completion. The shoe was small, designed for a foot no larger than her palm, the kind of shoe you would find in any colony's supply depot, ordered in bulk from a manufacturer on Earth who probably never knew where they ended up. It was scorched along one edge, the synthetic material fused and discolored by thermal pulse that had radiated outward from the impact site at a temperature high enough to vitrify soil but low enough at this distance to leave a shoe partially intact. She had picked it up. She had held it. She had put it in her suit's cargo pocket. She had not told anyone, not then, not in the debriefing, not in the years that followed. She still had it. It was in the bottom drawer of her desk in the flag suite of the finality, wrapped in a clean cloth. She did not look at it often. She did not need to. Its weight was a constant, a small gravitational field in the architecture of every decision she had made since Tessara, every promotion she had accepted, every operational plan she had drafted, every long watch she had kept in the silence of flag suites while fleets slept around her. The Draenith Ascendancy had apologized. They had sent a formal communication to Earth's diplomatic service expressing deep institutional regret for the unauthorized action at Tessara, and offering financial compensation calculated at the standard ascendancy rate for commercial disruption. The formula valued each human life at approximately 9,800 standard credits, roughly the same figure the ascendancy used to ensure a cargo container of industrial solvents. The apology was accompanied by an announcement that the 7 conclave members who had authorized the operation had been reassigned to advisory roles within the Ascendancy's Internal Review Bureau. Not removed, not prosecuted, not stripped of rank or privilege or access to the decision-making apparatus that had produced the vote. Reassigned to advisory roles in a bureau that reviewed trade disputes between Ascendancy member species about shipping tariffs and docking fees. Earth's government had accepted the apology. The diplomatic service had issued a statement acknowledging the Ascendancy's constructive engagement with the incident, and noting that both parties were committed to a framework of mutual accountability moving forward. The compensation, 412 million standard credits, had been deposited in an account administered by the Colonial Development Bureau. The case had been closed. The diplomatic relationship had been preserved. The trade agreements had been renewed on schedule. And 42,000 people had been converted into a line item in a budget report, their deaths balanced against the value of a commercial partnership with an 11-species trade federation, whose annual trade volume through Terran space exceeded 80 billion credits. Solène had read the diplomatic statement in the wardroom of the Harrow. She had read it twice, slowly, the way you read something when you want to make certain you have not misunderstood it, when the alternative, that you have understood it perfectly, is worse. Then she had set down her datapad, walked to her quarters, closed the door, and sat on the edge of her bunk for a very long time, holding the child's shoe in both hands, staring at the scorch mark, and understanding with perfect clarity that the system she served had just informed her that 42,000 murders could be resolved with a letter of regret, and a wire transfer valued at less than the cargo insurance on a freighter hold full of cleaning supplies. That was 19 years ago. In those 19 years, the Draenith Ascendancy had prospered. Their trade network expanded into 6 new sectors. Their conclave of margins doubled in membership as new species joined the Federation, drawn by the Ascendancy's commercial infrastructure and its reputation for. The irony was not lost on Solène's stable, predictable governance. The 7 who had voted for Tessara had been quietly promoted from their advisory roles back into senior positions within the Ascendancy's governance structure, a process conducted so incrementally that no single appointment triggered a diplomatic response from Earth or a public inquiry from the galactic press. First, an advisory commission chair. then a deputy directorship, then a full directorship with operational authority, then a seat on the reconstituted conclave with voting privileges restored. By the time Earth's intelligence service flagged the pattern, the 7 were embedded at the highest levels, and the diplomatic service had classified the matter as resolved within existing frameworks. Solène had noticed the pattern before the intelligence service did. She had tracked every appointment, every reassignment, every quiet promotion, building a file maintained on a personal data pad that she updated methodically over years, the way a cartographer updates a map of a coastline that is slowly, inevitably eroding. She had watched the ascendancy rehabilitate the architects of Tessara and call it institutional continuity. She had watched Earth's diplomatic service treat a colony massacre as a closed account and move on to new trade frameworks and strategic engagement summits and joint cultural exchange programs. And she had waited, with the particular patience of a woman who understood that some debts do not expire and some accounts cannot be closed by a wire transfer, no matter how many zeros it contains. She had risen through the ranks during those 19 years, not because of Tessara, not as some crusade of vengeance, but because she was exceptionally good at her job, and the Navy recognized it with the impersonal efficiency of an institution that valued competence above all else. Commander of the destroyer Cairn at 38, where she had managed the evacuation of a mining platform during a reactor malfunction and lost no one. Captain of the heavy cruiser Redoubt at 42, where she had commanded the ship through the Merak Station siege and earned the Navy Cross for tactical innovation under fire. Rear Admiral and Commander of Destroyer Squadron 12 at 46. Vice Admiral and Deputy Commander of 3rd Fleet at 49. Full Admiral and Commander of 3rd Fleet at 51. Responsible for 209 warships, 40,000 personnel, and the security of every Terran installation and colony in the Outer Reach. Each promotion earned on merit, each assignment completed with the precise, unshowy competence that characterized everything she did. But the file stayed current, the shoe stayed in the drawer, and the operational plan, the one she had never been asked to prepare, the one that existed only on her personal datapad, the one she updated every time a new intelligence assessment about the ascendancy crossed her desk or a new diplomatic communique landed with the ascendancy's name on it, grew more detailed with every passing year. Force allocations refined. Transit calculations updated as new corridor data became available. Rules of engagement sharpened. Target lists verified against current intelligence. The plan was not hope. It was not fantasy. It was preparation. The cold, professional acknowledgement that a trade federation which had gotten away with murdering 42,000 people once would, eventually, calculate that it could do so again. Now she was an admiral with 209 warships under her command, and 37 minutes ago the debt had come due. The intercept had arrived through Fleet Command's priority channel, a fragment of an internal conclave communication, captured by a listening post at Relay Tethys and decoded in 11 minutes by an analyst who had been monitoring ascendancy traffic for a routine threat assessment. The message was from Conclave Director Vashan Kaul, the most senior of the 7, now the ascendancy's chief diplomatic officer, the individual who had personally drafted the apology letter 19 years ago and signed it with the ascendancy's formal seal of institutional regret, a document that Solène had memorized the way a soldier memorizes the face of someone who owes an answer. The message was addressed to the commanders of a logistics flotilla stationed in the Marin Drift, the same corridor of space where Tessara had been, where the craters were still visible from orbit because nothing grows back on vitrified ground. 3 directives. First, reposition the flotilla's 12 vessels to designated coordinates in the Caldera approach corridor within 48 hours. Second, install kinetic impactor arrays on all 12 vessels. The arrays were already fabricated and stored at Ascendancy Depot 14, packed in standardized cargo modules listed in the depot's inventory as geological survey equipment, mass driver configuration, a designation that a junior analyst at Terran Naval Intelligence had flagged 18 months ago in a report that noted the discrepancy between the listed purpose and the actual specifications. The report had been acknowledged, logged, assigned a priority rating of routine, and apparently read by no one who was in a position to act on it. Third, await further instruction regarding the caldera adjustment and maintain communications security protocols consistent with category, territorial adjustment operations. Caldera, the system where Third Fleet was anchored, the system where the orbital platform housed 6,000 Terran civilian workers and their families, the system where 12 colonial transports were scheduled to arrive within the week, carrying 9,000 settlers bound for Caldera Prime's northern continent, families with children, engineers with equipment contracts, teachers who had signed 3-year commitments to schools not yet built, agricultural specialists who had spent months studying the planet's soil chemistry and dreaming about what they could grow there. The Ascendancy was doing it again. Different system, different decade, same math, same kinetic impactors, same logistics vessels converted to killing platforms, same filing category, territorial adjustment, infrastructure clearance, the same assumption that had killed 42,000 people at Tessara, that human colonies were commercial obstructions to be subtracted when the cost-benefit was favorable, and that the cost of doing so was a letter of regret and 9,800 credits per person, payable after the fact to a diplomatic service that would accept the payment and call the matter closed. Solène had read the intercept 3 times. She had cross-referenced the flotilla's positions with the coordinates in Call's directive. She had pulled the intelligence file on Depot 14 and confirmed the arrays. Then she had contacted Fleet Command. She had spoken with Admiral Rennick, the Chief of Fleet Operations, on an encrypted channel. Rennick was 61, a career strategist who had spent more years behind a planning console than on a bridge, and who possessed the particular quality of senior officers who have seen enough to know that some situations cannot be resolved inside the frameworks they were trained to apply. "You have confirmation of the arrays at Depot 14, Rennick asked. Naval Intelligence confirmed the inventory 18 months ago. A junior analyst flagged the discrepancy between the listed purpose and the actual specifications. The report was filed routine. And the flotilla repositioning. 12 vessels. Same class of converted freighters they used at Tessara, Ascendancy standard hull logistics carriers, each one large enough to mount 4 mass driver arrays with overlapping fields of fire. The coordinates in Call's directive place them within 40 hours transit of the Caldera system. The timeline gives them 72 hours to install the arrays after repositioning. After that, they are operationally ready for orbital bombardment. Silence on the channel, 5 seconds that felt like a geological age. "What are you recommending, Admiral?" Operation Tessara answered. She had prepared the operational plan 14 months ago, not on orders, not through the Planning Directorate or the Strategic Assessment Bureau. On her own in the flag suite, during the long watches when the fleet slept and the signal buoy turned its slow circle outside her viewport. A contingency plan for a scenario she had known, with the quiet certainty of that child's shoe in her desk drawer, would eventually arrive, the Ascendancy attempting another colony clearance, this time within reach of a Terran battle fleet. She had worked through the logistics, the force allocations, the transit calculations, the rules of engagement. She had identified 12 targets, one for each of the Ascendancy's logistics depots where kinetic impactor arrays could be manufactured, stored, or deployed. She had identified 7 more, the current locations of the 7 conclave members who had authorized Tessara and who now occupied positions of sufficient authority to authorize it again. "You have been planning this," Rennick said. "It was not a question." Since the day I took command of Third Fleet, Admiral. 14 months ago, I formalized what had been a moral certainty into an operational plan with specific force allocations, transit schedules, and target packages. Silence. 8 seconds. Solène could hear the hum of Rennick's office ventilation through the encrypted channel, a sound so ordinary it felt almost obscene against the weight of the conversation. Tessara should have been answered 19 years ago, Rennick said finally. The diplomatic service made a calculation. They got it wrong. They got it wrong, and 42,000 people are dead. And now the Ascendancy thinks the price of a colony is 9,800 credits per person and a letter. Yes, sir. Send me the plan. She transmitted the operational package. Rennick reviewed it in silence for 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Solène counted every one of them, sitting in the dark flag suite with the signal buoy turning its amber circle outside the viewport, and 209 sleeping warships waiting in the anchorage behind her for an order that would cross 400 light-years before dawn. You are authorized, Rennick said. Tessara answered, full scope. I will handle the Secretary General's office and the tribunal. The sealed indictments will be unblocked within the hour. Understood. Solène. Sir. Bring them in clean. Call and the other 6. Alive, unharmed, and in formal custody. I want them standing in a courtroom on Earth, not lying in craters on their homeworld. The entire point is that we are better than what they did. If we forget that, if a single one of them is harmed in custody, we are doing the same math they did, just with different numbers. That was always the plan, Admiral. Every target package specifies non-lethal extraction with medical support on standby. The Marine teams have been briefed on the distinction between a military operation and a law enforcement action, and they understand which one this is. The channel closed. That was 37 minutes ago. In the time since, Solène had activated Third Fleet's command network, issued sealed orders to 209 ship commanders, transmitted operational packages to 19 task group leaders, and set the execution clock to 400 fleet time, 3 hours from the moment she had received authorization. Now she sat in the dark and watched the signal buoy turn. The ship around her was waking. She could feel it in the subtle changes that 29 years of service had taught her to read, the vibration in the deck plating as the Finality's main drives began their pre-ignition cycle, the slight increase in air pressure as ventilation shifted from standby to combat circulation, the distant hum of weapons capacitors charging in the gunnery bays 6 decks below, the muffled sound of boots in corridors as watch officers moved to their stations. 209 ships were going through the same sequence simultaneously across the anchorage, each crew pulled from their bunks by the alert tone, each captain opening sealed orders for the first time. Solène's flag captain, Yvette Torin, appeared in the doorway of the flag suite. Torin was 40, compact, precise, dark hair cropped close, uniform already squared despite having been asleep 12 minutes ago, the kind of officer who communicated urgency by arriving faster than expected and standing straighter than usual. She was doing both. Fleet status report, Admiral. 191 ships acknowledged ready, 14 in pre-drive warm-up, estimated ready in 40 minutes, 4 reporting minor engineering items. The Kastner needs a coolant line flush, the Brennan's forward sensor array is completing a recalibration cycle, and the Voss and Meridian have watch crew shortages they are filling from the reserve roster. All 4 estimate full combat readiness within 90 minutes. That puts the fleet at full strength 40 minutes before execution. The plan holds, no delays. Torin paused. A fraction of a second, the hesitation of a professional who has a question she needs to ask even though she suspects the answer will change the weight of the night. The sealed orders reference a target list and an operational designation I have not seen distributed through normal planning channels, Admiral. Operation Tessara answered. I need to ask, is this sanctioned? Admiral Rennick authorized it 40 minutes ago. The authorization code is in your sealed packet, subsection 3. Verification Protocol Bravo 7. Torin verified. Her posture settled, uncertainty replaced by purpose. The target list has 19 entries, Solen said. 12 logistics depots across 8 ascendancy systems. 7 governance targets, individuals. Torin's eyes came up from the datapad. Individuals. The 7 members of the conclave of Margins who authorized the bombardment of Tessara. They have been reinstated to senior governance positions over the past 15 years through a series of quiet promotions designed to avoid diplomatic attention. Their current locations are confirmed as of 6 hours ago by Terran Naval Intelligence. Each will be visited by a marine extraction team with specific instructions. Detain, secure, transport to Earth for prosecution. Transport to where on Earth? The Hague. Earth's International War Crimes Tribunal has had sealed indictments prepared against all 7 for 11 years. The indictments were drafted by the Special Prosecutor's Office and approved by a judicial panel, but their execution was blocked by the diplomatic service under the existing framework agreement with the Ascendancy. That block was removed 18 minutes ago, when the evidence of a second planned colony clearance was forwarded to the Secretary General's office. Torin absorbed this with the speed of an officer who had been selected for flag captain duty, because she could integrate new information into an operational picture without losing step. The Ascendancy will characterize the extraction of their senior officials as an act of war. The Ascendancy committed an act of war 19 years ago when they murdered 42,000 people with converted freighters and filed it under commercial disruption protocols. The fact that our diplomatic service chose to call it something else does not change what it was. It changes what we tolerated. And what we tolerated taught them that they could do it again. Torin straightened. Marine insertion packages. Subsection 7. Building layouts, security assessments sourced from Ascendancy commercial construction filings, extraction routes with 2 contingency options per target. You have been building this for a long time, Admiral. Long enough. Torin left. The flag suite was quiet again. Solen reached for the bottom drawer of her desk. She opened it and unwrapped the cloth. The shoe was small, a child's shoe, designed for a foot no larger than her palm, the kind of shoe you could buy in any colony supply depot for 12 credits, mass-produced by a manufacturer on Earth who filled bulk orders for frontier settlements, and printed a logo on the insole that said, "Made for the Stars," in a font designed to make children smile. It was scorched along one edge, the synthetic material fused and discolored by heat that should not have been anywhere near a child's bedroom in a settlement on a quiet world at the edge of mapped space, heat that had traveled outward from a kinetic impact at a velocity calculated by a logistics officer in a boardroom who had never walked on the surface of a planet that human beings had made their home. She held it for 10 seconds, feeling its weight, almost nothing, physically, everything otherwise. Then she wrapped it again, placed it back in the drawer and closed it. At 3:40, Solen walked from the flag suite to the Finalities Combat Information Center, the CIC, a compartment 2 decks below the bridge, its walls lined with holographic projectors and tactical consoles, and the quiet hum of processing cores that could track every ship in a 30 light-year radius. Commander Liang, the senior tactical officer, was already at his station, his displays lit with the fleet's disposition and the transit corridors that would carry 19 task groups to their targets. Lieutenant Osai, the communications officer, sat at the signals desk with her hands folded, headset on, waiting for the traffic that would begin the moment the fleet moved. Master Chief Peterson, the CIC's senior enlisted, stood at the rear console with a mug of coffee that had stopped steaming 20 minutes ago, his eyes tracking the status boards with the practiced attention of a man who had stood watches in rooms like this for 30 years and had learned to read trouble in the flicker of an indicator light. They had not been told the target. They had been told the alert status and the timeline. The rest was in the sealed orders that would open at execution time. But they were professionals, and they could read the indicators, the fleet-wide alert, the pre-dawn timeline, the fact that the admiral was standing in the CIC in full uniform at 3:40 instead of sleeping in the flag suite, and they understood that something significant was being set in motion. Fleet departure sequence is loaded, Liang reported. 19 task groups, departure intervals of 35 seconds, sequential by transit corridor priority. All groups have confirmed receipt of sealed operational packages. Transit corridor reservations are filed with no destination specified, standard operational security. Communication status, Solin asked. All encrypted burst channels active, Osai said. Task group leaders acknowledge standing by for execution order. No intercepts detected on ascendancy monitoring frequencies. They are not aware of the fleet's status change. They will be aware in approximately 5 hours, Solin said. When they are, I want every channel recorded. Every communication the ascendancy transmits from the moment of first contact, military, diplomatic, commercial, civilian, captured and logged for the tribunal record. Everything they say in the first hour will be evidence. Understood, Admiral. Full spectrum recording is active. Solin looked at the tactical display. The neat icons of 209 warships arranged in the anchorage above Caldera Prime, still and patient, their crews completing the final preparations for a departure that would scatter them across 400 light-years of space in the time it took to finish a cup of coffee. In a few minutes, those icons would begin to move, and the anchorage would empty, and the Caldera Traffic Authority would register the departures as a cascade of automated alerts. And somewhere in the Draenith Ascendancies, capital a conclave director named Vashan Kal would be sleeping in his residence, dreaming whatever dreams Trade Federation officials dream about, margins, probably, and leverage ratios. And the comfortable certainty that consequences could always be negotiated down to a manageable figure. He would wake to a different certainty. At 3:47, Solin spoke 2 words into the fleet command channel: execute Tessara. The first task group cleared the anchorage 11 seconds later. The transit to Draenith Sola took 4 hours and 19 minutes. Solin spent the transit in the Flag Suite's tactical center, surrounded by holographic projections showing the real-time positions of her dispersed task groups as they moved through transit corridors toward their targets. Each group reported readiness at 10-minute intervals on encrypted burst channels. The communications were terse: ship names, status codes, estimated arrival times, weapons system confirmations. No commentary, no questions. The plan was distributed, the orders were clear, and the crews were professionals who understood that the quality of an operation was inversely proportional to the amount of discussion required to execute it. At 8:06 fleet time, Task Group Solin dropped out of transit above the Ascendancy's capital world. Draenith Sola was beautiful in the way that wealthy worlds tend to be. A blue-green sphere wrapped in thin cloud bands, its surface marked by vast agricultural estates and gleaming commercial arcologies connected by maglev networks visible from orbit as thin silver threads drawn across continents. The orbital layer was dense with commercial traffic, thousands of freighters, tankers, passenger liners, and logistics vessels moving through the Ascendancy's central trade hub in a complex choreography managed by 17 traffic control stations. It was the beating heart of an interstellar economy, and it had never seen a Terran warship in its traffic lanes. Until now. 47 Terran warships materialized without announcement, without hail, without the customary diplomatic notification that preceded any military transit through sovereign space. The finality emerged first: 700 meters of angular hull, weapons-heavy silhouette, battle-scarred armor plating that bore the marks of 4 major engagements and 17 years of outer-reach patrols. Every dent and scorch mark a word in a language that required no translation. Behind it, in tight formation, came 46 more. Heavy cruisers with main batteries trained forward, destroyers running active targeting systems whose scan patterns lit up every military-grade sensor in the system. Electronic warfare frigates broadcasting jamming patterns that turned the Ascendancy's military communications network into white noise. Marine assault transports carrying the extraction teams, and fleet tenders positioned to sustain the operation for as long as necessary. They did not fire. They did not maneuver aggressively. They appeared, held formation, and waited with the absolute stillness of a verdict being delivered. 9 seconds of silence across 17 traffic control stations. 9 seconds during which the operators stared at returns showing 47 military-grade signatures, where there should have been nothing but cargo haulers and passenger liners. Then every channel in the Draenith system activated simultaneously as the operators attempted to hail, challenge, warn, and redirect a fleet that was responding to none of them. Solène opened a single channel. Wide broadcast, unencrypted, transmitted on every frequency the Ascendancy used for official communications, commercial traffic coordination, and public information services. She had written the message 14 months ago in the flag suite at Caldera and revised it once last night after the intercept arrived to include the specific Caldera targeting data. This is Admiral Marin Solène, commanding officer of the Terran Third Fleet, to the conclave of Margins, the people of the Draenith Ascendancy, and every government, military, and civilian listening post within range of this signal. 19 years ago, the conclave of Margins authorized Operation Quiet Margin, the orbital bombardment of the Terran colony of Tessara using kinetic impactor arrays deployed from converted logistics vessels. 42,314 men, women, and children were killed. The conclave filed the operation under its commercial disruption protocols and classified the colony's population as infrastructure. Earth's diplomatic service accepted an apology and financial compensation calculated at the rate the Ascendancy uses to insure cargo containers of industrial solvents, 9,800 credits per human life, 400 credits less than the insurance value of cleaning fluid. She paused, let it land. Every ship in the system was listening, every traffic control station, every orbital platform, every surface arcology with a communications receiver pointed at the sky. 39 hours ago, Terran Naval Intelligence intercepted a directive from Conclave Director Vashan Kal authorizing the preparation of a second colony clearance, this time targeting the Caldera system, where 15,000 Terran civilians reside. The kinetic impactor arrays were already manufactured and stored at Ascendancy Depot 14. 12 logistics vessels were being repositioned for the strike. The filing category was the same: territorial adjustment, subcategory, infrastructure clearance. The assumption was the same, that human lives are a variable in a trade equation, subtractable when the math is favorable, payable at 9,800 credits per person after the craters have cooled. 3 seconds of silence. On the tactical display, the Ascendancy's commercial traffic had frozen, ships holding position, drives cycling to idle, the choreography of a trillion-credit trade network suspended by the sound of one voice on an open channel. The assumption was incorrect. It was incorrect 19 years ago, and the error was compounded by a diplomatic resolution that communicated to the Ascendancy that the murder of 42,000 people carried no lasting consequence beyond a payment and a letter of institutional regret. That message is now being corrected. She checked the tactical display. 11 of 12 task groups had reached their depot targets, green icons at 11 depots. The 12th, Depot 9, the most distant, was 30 seconds from arrival. All 7 marine extraction teams had inserted at their governance targets. 5 of 7 were already reporting targets secured. The operation was synchronized within a 90-second window across 400 light-years. Operation Tessara Answered is now in effect. 12 Ascendancy logistics depots containing kinetic impactor manufacturing and storage facilities are being dismantled by Terran naval forces. The impactor arrays at Depot 14 have been seized as evidence for the tribunal proceedings. The 12 logistics vessels being repositioned for the Caldera operation have been interdicted and are under Terran control. The 7 members of the Conclave of Margins who authorized the Tessara bombardment, including Director Vashin Kal, are being taken into custody by Terran Marines for transfer to Earth, where they will stand before the International War Crimes Tribunal on sealed indictments that have been pending for 11 years. The report scrolled across her display. Depot 1, secured, impactor arrays destroyed in controlled detonation, facility sealed, no casualties. Depot 4, secured, manufacturing equipment seized for evidentiary cataloging. Depot 7, brief resistance from a private security detachment of 16 personnel, suppressed in 4 minutes by Marine assault team. 3 Ascendancy security wounded and receiving Terran medical treatment, no Terran casualties. Depot 12, secured, arrays found partially assembled on 2 logistics vessels in the depot's maintenance bay, disassembled and catalogued. Governance Site 3, Director Vashin Kal taken into custody at his private residence on Draenith Sola at 8:11, unarmed, offering no physical resistance, requesting communication with his legal counsel. Governance Site 5, Conclave member Drethan Vo detained while attempting to reach a private shuttle at a commercial spaceport, apprehended by a 4 Marine team on the access ramp, uninjured, compliant after initial identification. Governance Site 1, Conclave member Tessari Kal, Vashin's sister, and the logistics coordinator who had arranged the freighter conversions for the original Tessara operation, detained at her office in the Conclave chambers, found sitting at her desk reviewing trade reports as though it were an ordinary morning. Solène watched the reports and felt nothing she would call satisfaction. What she felt was closer to the specific physical sensation of setting down a weight after carrying it too long, not joy, not triumph, but the relief of muscles unclenching after 19 years of holding one position. The weight was not gone. It would never be gone, but it was no longer hers alone to carry. To the Conclave of Margins, she continued on the open channel. Earth does not seek the destruction of the Draenith Ascendancy. We do not seek reparations calculated by your formulas. We do not seek territorial concessions or trade advantages or the humiliation of your people. We seek accountability for a specific crime and the prevention of its repetition. The 12 depots are being dismantled because they enabled the crime and were being prepared to enable it again. The 7 individuals are being arrested because they ordered it, were promoted for surviving it, and were in the process of ordering it a second time. The logistics flotilla is being interdicted because it was days from executing the same crime against a new target with the same weapons and the same paperwork. She let the silence hold. When these objectives are complete, Third Fleet will withdraw from Ascendancy space. No Ascendancy civilian will be harmed. No Ascendancy commercial vessel will be seized or damaged. No Ascendancy world will be bombarded. We are not here to do to you what you did to Tessara. We are here to ensure that what was done to Tessara is answered, in a courtroom before judges in the light, with evidence and testimony and the full weight of galactic jurisprudence. She paused one more time. But understand this clearly, and understand it as a permanent entry in the diplomatic record of this galaxy. What was done at Tessara was an act of war disguised as a commercial decision. The 42,000 dead were human beings, not infrastructure, not a line item, not a category in your filing system. What is happening now is not revenge. It is the consequence that should have arrived 19 years ago and was delayed by a diplomatic framework that valued the stability of a trade relationship over the justice owed to 42,000 murdered civilians. The delay is over. The framework has been corrected, and if the Draenith Ascendancy attempts another action against a Terran colony, any size, anywhere, at any time, the response will not be limited to depots and individuals. It will encompass the full operational capacity of the Terran Navy, applied without negotiation, without compensation frameworks, without diplomatic intermediaries, and without the expectation of a framework resolution. There will be no letter. There will be no wire transfer. There will be no advisory reassignments. There will be a fleet, and it will not leave. She closed the channel. Governance Site 2, Conclave member Harith Dren, the former chair of the Military Oversight Subcommittee, who had provided the operational analysis supporting the cost-benefit assessment for the Tessara bombardment, detained at his country, estate on the Ascendancy's agricultural world of Kethan Mar he had been gardening. The Marine team leader had found him in an ornamental soil bed with his hands in the dirt, tending a species of flowering shrub that grew only in the Ascendancy's temperate zones. He had looked up at the Marines, at their weapons, at the tactical shuttle hovering above his estate's perimeter wall, and he had said one word, Tessara, in a tone that suggested he had been expecting this visit for 19 years, and was, in some private chamber of his broker's mind, surprised it had taken so long. Governance Site 4, Conclave member Orsh Salin, the budget director who had signed the financial authorization for the converted freighters and the mass driver arrays, detained at a commercial conference center on Draenith Sola, where he had been scheduled to deliver a keynote address on interstellar trade efficiency to an audience of 300 Ascendancy business leaders. The conference had been titled Margins of the Future. The Marines had arrived during the pre-address reception. Salin had been holding a glass of something pale and expensive when the team leader presented the warrant. He had set the glass down carefully on a nearby table, straightened his formal tunic, and walked out of the conference center between two Marines without speaking to anyone in the room. 300 business leaders had watched him go in silence. Governance Site 6, Conclave member Perlen Vass, the youngest of the 7 at the time of the vote, now the Ascendancy's trade envoy to 3 neighboring civilizations, detained at the Ascendancy's diplomatic mission on the neutral station of Pelori Hub. She had been in a meeting with representatives of the Tessari Combine, a trade partner whose name bore an uncomfortable phonetic similarity to the colony the Ascendancy had destroyed, a coincidence that Solène had noted in her file with the flat observation that the galaxy occasionally produced its own editorial commentary. Vass had submitted to the arrest without protest, and asked only that her personal effects be forwarded to her family on Draenith Sola. The flag suite was quiet. The tactical display pulsed with updates, green icons at each depot, blue icons at each governance site, the interdicted flotilla holding position in the Marin Drift under the guns of Task Group Rennick. 14 minutes since arrival in the capital system. No shots fired at the capital. No damage to any Ascendancy civilian asset. The commercial traffic was resuming its patterns, slowly, cautiously, the freighters and tankers giving the Terran warships a wide berth as they moved through the orbital lanes like small animals navigating around a predator that has announced it is not hungry, but has not left. Down in the CIC, Solène knew Commander Liang would be cataloging every Ascendancy signal that crossed his intercept arrays, the panicked communications between traffic control stations, the frantic queries from the Ascendancy's Military Coordination Bureau to a fleet that had gone dark under the jamming, the confused civilian broadcasts from the surface arcologies asking why Terran warships were in orbit and whether they should seek shelter. All of it was being recorded. All of it would be transmitted to The Hague as part of the evidentiary record. And somewhere in that cascade of signals, Solène knew, there would be a particular kind of silence. The silence from the offices and residences of 7 conclave members who were no longer at their desks, no longer answering their communications, no longer available to reassure their colleagues that the situation could be managed, because they were sitting in the back of marine transport vehicles with their hands in their laps and a Terran corporal explaining, in polite but unambiguous terms, the procedural steps of an international arrest warrant. She had imagined this moment many times over 19 years. Not with pleasure. She was not a person who took pleasure in the exercise of force, even justified force. She had imagined it the way an engineer imagines the completion of a bridge that has been under construction for decades. Not the ribbon cutting, but the moment when the last structural member locks into place and the mathematics that have been holding the design together on paper finally hold it together in reality. The bridge stands or it does not. The answer arrives or it does not. And 19 years of waiting and planning and updating a file on a personal datapad while rising through the ranks of a navy that had decided to let a trade federation's apology stand as sufficient payment for 42,000 lives. All of that was either justified by what was happening right now across 400 light years of ascendancy space, or it was not. It was. Torin reappeared in the doorway. All 12 depots report secured and neutralized. Impactor array destructions confirmed at 8 sites. The remaining 4 are in controlled demolition sequence and on schedule. All 7 governance targets are in marine custody, alive and uninjured. Total ascendancy casualties across the entire operation. 3 private security personnel wounded during the Depot 7 action, all receiving Terran medical care, all stable. The Caldera flotilla is under escort, all 12 vessels accounted for, crews confined to quarters, mass driver arrays being removed by naval engineering teams. Kyle. Director Call was cooperative. He asked to communicate with his conclave colleagues. The Marine team leader informed him that communication privileges would be determined by Earth's judicial process upon arrival. He accepted this without argument. He then asked whether the tribunal proceedings would be conducted in Terran Standard or Ascendancy Trade Common. The team leader informed him that simultaneous translation would be provided. He appeared to find this acceptable. He is a broker, Solon said. He understands when the terms of a negotiation have changed, and he is no longer the one setting them. There is one additional item, Torin said. The Ascendancy's remaining conclave members, those not under arrest, have transmitted a formal communication requesting immediate diplomatic dialogue. They are proposing a framework negotiation under the existing bilateral protocols, citing the trade partnership agreements as a basis for resolution. Forward the communication to Earth's diplomatic service with my operational summary attached. Inform the conclave that Third Fleet does not conduct diplomatic negotiations. We execute operational directives. The diplomatic service will establish contact with the conclave when the indictments have been processed and the judicial proceedings scheduled. Until then, the Ascendancy's communication should be directed to the office of the Special Prosecutor at The Hague. Understood. Torin turned to leave. Solon called her back. Yvette. Admiral. The compensation the Ascendancy paid after Tessara, the financial settlement they offered and our diplomatic service accepted. Do you know the specific figure? Torin pulled the data from the operational briefing package. 412 million standard credits, total disbursement to the Colonial Development Bureau's Recovery Fund. Approximately 9,800 credits per casualty, calculated at the Ascendancy's standard commercial disruption rate. 9,800 credits per person. The Ascendancy's current standard insurance rate for a lost cargo container of industrial solvents, listed in their own commercial filings, which are public record in the Ascendancy's trade database, is 10,200 credits. She paused. Let the number sit between them. They valued 42,000 human lives at 400 credits less per person than they value a container of cleaning fluid. And our diplomatic service deposited the payment and issued a statement about constructive engagement. Torrin said nothing. There was nothing adequate to say to a number like that. It occupied the space between them, small and precise and more damning than any weapon in Third Fleet's arsenal. Make sure that figure is in the operational record that accompanies the prisoners to Earth. When Vashan Kal stands before the tribunal, I want it entered into evidence during the prosecution's opening statement, not the total, the per-person rate, and the comparison to the commercial insurance rate. Let the judges hear what the ascendancy decided a human being was worth. Let the gallery hear it. Let the press carry it to every inhabited system in the galaxy. Let every civilization that has ever contemplated calculating the acceptable cost of murdering a colony hear the number and understand what kind of math was being done, and what kind of answer it eventually produced. It will be in the record, Admiral. One more thing. The 4 conclave members who voted against the Tessara operation, the 4 who recorded their formal objections, their names are in the intelligence file. Make sure the tribunal receives their dissenting statements alongside the authorization records. They voted no. They were overruled. They should not be erased from the record by the actions of the 7 who voted yes. Their objections, which the ascendancy later cited as proof that the decision was properly debated, should be read into the court record as evidence that the crime was committed with full knowledge that it was wrong, by individuals who were told it was wrong, and who chose to proceed anyway because the math was favorable. I will include the dissenting statements, Admiral. Torrin left. Solen turned back to the viewport. Below her, Draenith Sola turned slowly in the daylight, its cloud bands bright, its surface gleaming with the arcologies and agricultural estates of a civilization that had calculated the value of human life and gotten the answer wrong, not by accident, not by ignorance, not by the kind of cultural misunderstanding that could be explained away in a diplomatic white paper, but by the deliberate application of a commercial formula that placed 42,000 people below the replacement cost of industrial cleaning supplies. In the bottom drawer of her desk, wrapped in a clean cloth, a child's shoe waited. It had waited for 19 years. It had traveled with her from the Harrow to the cairn, from the cairn to the redoubt, from the redoubt to a series of increasingly larger flag offices aboard increasingly powerful warships, until it reached this desk, in this flag suite, aboard the most powerful dreadnought in the Terran Navy, in orbit above the homeworld of the civilization that had killed the child who wore it. It would travel one more time. She would bring it to The Hague, not as evidence, because the prosecution would have its own exhibits and its own experts and its own data. She would bring it as a witness. A small, scorched, silent witness to the moment when a trade federation had done the math on a human colony and gotten the answer wrong, and a woman who had walked through the craters 19 years ago had decided, with the patience of someone who understood that consequence is not the same as revenge, that the answer would be corrected. The drawer closed. The fleet held its position. The reports continued to arrive in steady intervals. Green, blue, green, confirmed, secured, neutralized, all targets accounted for. No casualties, demolition proceeding on schedule, prisoners secured, and en route to rendezvous coordinates for transfer to Earth. The operation would be complete within the hour. The prisoners would reach Earth within the week. The tribunal would convene within the month. And the record, the permanent, unalterable record of what had been done at Tessara and what it had cost to answer it, would stand for as long as civilizations kept records and courts held sessions and human beings insisted that the value of a life could not be expressed as a line item in a commercial disruption filing. Below her, the world of the Draenith ascendancy turned in the daylight, its orbital beacons flashing their navigation patterns, its trade network slowly, cautiously resuming its rhythms around the 47 warships holding station above the capital, with the patience of an answer that had waited 19 years to arrive. The ascendancy's beacons turned with the particular confidence of a civilization that had always known the price of everything, every commodity, every route, every market, every risk, and had built an interstellar economy on the certainty that all things, including consequences, could be priced and paid for and filed away. Marin Solin sat in her chair and watched the world turn, and she knew something that the ascendancy was only now beginning to understand: the difference between price and cost. Price was a number on a ledger. Cost was 209 warships, 11 sealed indictments, 12 demolished depots, and a woman with a child's shoe in her desk drawer who had waited 19 years for the math to be corrected. The math was corrected, the answer was delivered. And it was enough.